Okay, so today we're going to talk about something that really applies to whatever instrument it is that you're trying to learn. And honestly, it applies to anything that you're trying to learn that you haven't done yet before, whether that's like riding a skateboard or playing a new sport or learning a new language or anything that you're taking on that you've never done before. In fact, I always try to have at least one thing in my life that I'm working on that I'm really terrible at, that I'm a beginner at, just so I remember what that feeling is of like, everybody else knows how this thing works and I don't, and I'm terrible at this thing and I'm just messing up. And I find that almost all of these principles apply to almost anything new that you're trying to learn how to do. So, a couple things. First of all, practice is where all of the progress happens. So you can take lessons from the best teachers in the world. You can watch all the YouTube videos that you want. You can do whatever you want as far as like trying to get information in, but really, when it comes down to it, playing music is a matter of training your muscles how to do something. It's not about how to understand how to play anything. So if you've got it in your head, cool, that's great. You're not going to be a great player until it gets into your muscles and you're doing in your body the things that your mind already understands how to do. So if you ever have that feeling of like, why won't my hands do what I want them to do? That means you're a musician. That's the way that we all feel while we're practicing. So when you're practicing, that's when you're actually getting better, because you're getting it from your brain into your muscles, and then you're becoming a musician. And then the other thing that you should remember is that practice time is really about creating good habits. So it doesn't have to be like torturous work. Now, practice time on anything new is usually not going to be a whole lot of fun, at least for a large part of the time. So if you feel like, I really like playing my instrument, but I really hate practicing, welcome to the club. That's the way we all feel, because practicing is really hard work. But the idea is you want to set up good habits so that when you sit down, you're actually making good progress instead of sitting down and just torturing yourself with stuff that's hard to do. You want to make sure you've got the right habits, so you're doing it the right way and making the most amount of progress for the time that you're putting in. So rule number one, the first habit that you want to get into is making sure that you're not trying to sound good. All of your practice time, almost all of your practice time, should sound absolutely terrible. If you heard me practicing, you would wonder why in the world I'm teaching music, because when I'm practicing, I'm trying to do things that I can't do yet. And so I can't do them yet, so it doesn't sound like I can do them yet, because I can't do them yet. So if you're practicing, you're working on stuff that you can't do yet, it shouldn't sound good. The vast majority of your practice time should sound pretty terrible. Now, once it starts to sound good, that's cool. That means it's time to move on to something else to practice, because now you've your brain has taught your muscles how to do this thing, and so now that's something that you can play. Now you can play your instrument that way, but now we're not practicing anymore. That goes in the bin of, these are the tools that I can use to play, and then here are the tools that I don't have yet, and those are the things I need to practice. Now this next thing kind of applies more specifically to music, but you need to make sure that you're always counting out loud wherever possible. And that might not make sense until you get an assignment that has counting in it. But there are going to be a lot of times where you need to put the right note in the right spot with the right rhythm, and you need to count out loud to make sure that those are going in place. Now, if you're going to be working on something else and you want to apply this principle, what it really means is go slowly enough and be deliberate enough that you teach your muscles how to do the right things with the right timing and in the right order. Because if you don't get your counting right in music, when you practice this thing over and over, your muscles are going to learn whatever you're teaching them. And if you're teaching them to do it at the wrong time or in the wrong order, they're gonna learn that. And then they know how to do that the wrong way. And then trying to get it the right way is virtually impossible. So make sure you go slow enough and you're deliberate enough. You put everything in the correct steps, even if it feels painfully slow. And this is going to be kind of a theme throughout these practice habits. Even if it feels painfully slow, make sure you go slow enough that your muscles get it in the right order, and then as they speed up, then everything will be in the right order, and you won't have to go and relearn everything. And this next one is the one that everybody loves to skip, and that is sing everything that you play. I would also say play everything that you sing, but we'll get to that later. For right now, whatever it is that you're playing, even if it doesn't have words to it, or if you're playing drums and there's like no notes to it, just using your mouth to recreate the sounds is a huge part of music. It's like an automatic thing that you can pay a lot of money for. It's a thing called ear training. So like ear training is its own thing, but you can do your own ear training if you just commit to every single note that you play, try to sing that along with your playing, and it's gonna go a lot better for you, and you can like kind of avoid this whole other thing of like becoming a great musician and not having any ear training. You can just do it right along with your playing if you're singing everything you play. Now, once again, number 4 is gonna go back to kind of number 2, using proper technique. That means that your muscles are going to learn whatever you're teaching them. So, you know, if it's on piano, you gotta curve your fingers. If you're on guitar, you wanna make sure you got the right hand shapes over here and that you're using the right types of strumming patterns. In drums, that you're using the correct sticking. Whatever it is, the technique that your teacher has given to you, you're gonna need to make sure that you use that, because otherwise, again, your fingers, your muscles, your arms, they're all learning all the stuff that you're teaching them. So if you're teaching them wrong and you're like, it sounds good, it'll probably work out. It might work out for now, but once you get later on into your musicianship and you're trying to do something that's harder, that needs that foundation of that really good technique, you're not gonna have it, and then you have to go all the way back to the beginning and then reteach yourself all the proper techniques. So if your teacher brings it up, I really hate to say this, but it might be super important that you actually do that stuff. So use proper technique, because your muscles are paying attention. They're learning all the things you're teaching them. Okay, number 5 is probably the most important out of all the concepts in music. And this is the one that's kind of hard to teach, but you need to play all of your songs as if they're songs. So like just playing the right notes in the right order is not music. It's not really music until you imagine that you're on a stage in front of an audience and you're really wanting to wow them and you play it with feeling. It feels kind of stupid, especially for adult students. They really hate doing this because, well, for all kinds of reasons. But anyway, kids are usually better at this, but everyone needs to imagine that you're performing for an audience and play the song as if you're trying to impress them, as if you're trying to take all of these notes and really create music out of it. It's the same as any other language. Honestly, like if I just sat here and told you, number 5 is play it like a song. It must sound like music, not just notes. Like those were all of the right words. They were all in the right order and kind of at the right time, but it didn't sound like a dude talking. It just sounded like words that happened to be in the right order. So it's important that when you're playing music, you really turn it into music. And if you don't, it's never gonna become music because you're gonna be too afraid that maybe I'm doing it wrong, and so probably the safest thing to do is just play all of the right notes in the right order. There, I did it, now I didn't lose. That's not the same thing as winning. When you play your music, you gotta let it live. You gotta play it like it's music. And number 6 kind of goes back to some of the other rules. Writing in your counting, going slow enough, being deliberate, because your muscles, again, are paying attention to what you're teaching them. So writing in your counting, if you're doing sheet music, you need to write in your counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and whatever it is. You got to make sure that all these things go in the right place. You need to count out loud. You need to write in your counting. You need to go slowly. These all go back to your muscles are paying attention. So make sure you don't teach them the wrong way. Take it as slow as you need and write in all of the notes that you need. Mess up that music. That music is yours. So print it out, get your pencil, write it in, mess up whatever you need to mess up on the page so you don't mess it up in your muscles. Now, number 7, I don't know if this is the most important or the least important. This is probably in the middle, but you need to make sure that you have someone, maybe a teacher, maybe a music mentor, maybe someone you look up to, maybe it's just a buddy who also plays music, but someone that you can call when you have questions, because a teacher can basically do 3 things for you. Now, anymore, there's YouTube, there's the internet. You don't need a teacher to give you information like what I'm doing right now. Let's ignore that. You don't need a teacher to get you information or to show you notes or to give you more about how to play. There are 3 things basically that a teacher can do. They can inspire you. When you watch them, you're like, whoa, I want to be like that. So that you go back to your instrument and you practice. So they can inspire you. They can hold you accountable. So like in my one-on-one lessons, if we have a lesson every week, pretty much what I know is there's going to be 2 days that every student will practice. Hopefully, if I'm doing my job right, there'll be at least 2 days that students practice. One is the day of the lesson, right after the lesson. So we get done with the lesson like, yes, I can do this. And they practice hard. And then the next day comes and some of them practice and some of them don't. And the next day, 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 and the next day is time for a lesson and everybody freaks out. They're like, oh no, I'm gonna go see Jamin and I better have my stuff together. So they practice a whole lot the day before. That's life. That's real. That's called accountability. That means that every now and then you know that someone's going to be listening to you, and so you need to practice up for that. So the day of the lesson, right after the lesson, and the day because they're inspired, and the day of the lesson right before the lesson because they're terrified. Those are the two most efficient practice times probably. So accountability is the second thing the teacher can provide. Inspiration, accountability, and then the last one would be efficiency. So hopefully stuff like this, lessons like this, teach you how to practice better. So if you're gonna practice for an hour and you're doing it the wrong way or with the wrong habits, you're still gonna get better, honestly. Like even with bad habits, you're still gonna be a better musician than when you started an hour ago, but hopefully a good teacher can help you use that hour to not just get 1 hour better, but to get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 hours better in that short amount of time. So inspiration, accountability, and efficiency. Other than that, like pretty much you got the internet, you've got all the information out there you could possibly want. So make sure that you've got someone that you can call for one of those 3 things, and maybe they can answer a question or two too and give you some information. And unfortunately, now it's time for me to introduce you to your nemesis. This is a metronome. This is an expensive metronome. This is all it does. Don't get an expensive metronome. There's free apps, there's websites. It just clicks. A metronome is kind of like a play-along track. The idea behind the metronome is to tell you whether or not your rhythms are perfect. So what I hear all the time is, well, I can play the song and I sound great, but the metronome messes me up, or the play-along track messes me up. So before you say that to your teacher, let me let you know, that's not a real thing. If the metronome is messing you up, it's because you were messing up without the metronome and you just didn't know it, and the metronome let you know that you were messing up. So practice with the metronome. It's going to tell you whether or not you're messing up. The metronome is not messing you up. The play-along track is not messing you up. It's just going to tell you whether your rhythms are right or not. Now, if we take this outside of the context of music and you're working on learning something else new, the metronome is like some other third perspective, because when you are focused on your music and you're using 100% of your brain power to try to get all of the notes right at the right time, and you're trying to put it all together, there's no brain space left for you to know whether or not your rhythms are right, because you would have to be playing and also at the same time be watching yourself play and see if that lines up with the right rhythms. So that means that you're probably, at that point, you're not really practicing, because practicing takes up your full brain, right? So there's no way to practice and to watch yourself practice if you're using up your full brain. So if you're outside of music, that just means you need someone else to watch you and tell you whether or not you're doing it all the right way, because if it's taking a lot of your brain space, there's just no brain power left to evaluate yourself. Now, this next one should be really good news. For some reason, people are not excited about this, but when you're practicing, you should not try to play an entire song. You probably shouldn't even try to play an entire passage. What you should try to play is the part that you can already play. Maybe that's nothing. Maybe that's 1 note. Maybe that's 2 notes. Maybe it's just the first line. Whatever it is that you can already play, and it's super easy, and it doesn't take any of your brain power at all. Play that and try to add in 1 extra note. 1 note, not 5 extra notes, not an extra whole line. Don't try to go from the beginning of the song to the end of the song. Because what's happening here is when you go from the beginning of the song to the end of the song, your brain can't remember all the stuff that you worked on from the beginning to the end. So you get to the end of the song and then you go back to the beginning, you're like, all right, brain, let's do that again. Your brain's like, I didn't remember all that stuff. We just went through it a whole entire song. So what you want to do is, if you only know 1 note, that's fine. What you should work on then is 1 note plus 1 extra note. You should work on the first 2 notes of the song. Once the first 2 notes of the song are easy, you should work on those 2 notes and try to add in 1 more note. And you try to add in one more note and one more note and one more note and one more note. And once you got, 10, 20, 30 notes, you shouldn't try to go back to the beginning every time and do 30 notes plus one. Just do the last little section plus one note. So, let's pretend, 30 notes of the song, the first 30 notes. And so you're gonna work on note 31 over here. So you're gonna practice all 30 notes and try to get to note 31. If you get it perfectly, don't go back to note number 1. Just go back to note number 20 or 25. Go back a few notes and then try to work on that next note, because it's the one note you can't do yet. That's where the real practice is happening. So when you practice from note 1 to note 30, and that already takes 0 brain power, you can already do that easily. That's not practice time, that's playing time. So the practice time is that one additional note that you can't quite do yet. So you want to keep running into that wall over and over and over until you can do that one extra note. Once you have that down, add in one more note, go back a little bit and work on that. And every, 20, 30, 40, 50 tries, go back to the beginning just to make sure you still have the whole thing. But the point here is you want to add one note to your practicing. Don't go from the beginning all the way through the end. Now this next one, I don't know if it actually has an application outside of music, but when you're playing, you want to make sure that you're playing to listen. So we talked a little bit about this earlier, that when you're using all of your brain power, you're trying to play the song and there's no brain power left to look at yourself practicing. But that's really the goal, is to be able to play music and hear yourself play music and evaluate whether or not it sounds good, which means you got to practice enough that the song that you're working on doesn't take 100% of your brain power. It needs to take 50 or 60% of your brain power, so you can use the other percent of your brain power to watch yourself play and evaluate yourself. Now the other thing in this one is that we're actually way better as humans in most cases at reproducing things that we hear than reproducing things that we see. So, if I gave you the sheet music for some rhythm and I tried to have you play that rhythm out for me, that's gonna be way harder than if I just give you a rhythm So sadly, the lesson preview has come to an end, and it's time to say goodbye to everyone watching the free streams. Of course, paying subscribers at learnpianolive.com can continue watching this lesson and several hundred others like it in the archives. So come on over and check us out, and if you like what you saw, at least like and subscribe, and then tell your friends to head on over to learnpianolive.com to start enjoying this journey with us.